Hello everyone, welcome back to the KMTRADERS channel. So this is the full market analysis volume 112. So just giving an insight of what we got up ahead for next week, and also compare our analysis from last week as well. So we'll start off with gold. So we were looking at basically price, potentially making a reversal over from that last week drop from the 24th of Feb. So what we can see, price is probably still looking like it can push up once more. So what I'm going to be looking at now is something like so, where price may want to push up just once more, and then we could expect the drop, because essentially it makes perfect sense for me to anticipate a drop because of how price is consistently pushing up higher and higher. So in my sense, well, in this case, as price has just been pushing higher, it makes sense for the pullback to come into play at some point. So really we're just waiting for price to kind of show us that it's willing to drop off. I personally did think it was going to be from that week, well, we were going to see from this week, but as you can see, we're pretty much still stepping up. So I think maybe next week we could expect maybe one push up higher and then that complete fall over to the downside. So I'm not necessarily looking for complete reversals where we expect price to rally down further. I'm just looking for price to just come back down just ever so slightly, and for that time being, it's going to be a temporary short-term sell. So that's kind of the bias that I'm going off with for gold for next week. So moving on to EURUSD. So for this, completely did not expect price to drop off this much, but the expectation here, I think we spoke about, was for price to potentially rally up higher. Well, as we can see from this, price completely dropped off, and I think I did mention that there would be a slight pullback, but I'm not entirely too sure if I said price would to drop into 1.11 further. But I think, just based off of just our annotation that we've drawn, maybe we could have taken a sell if the pullback was just a little bit more cleaner for me personally. But nonetheless, that's completely fine. We can just go with this now. So price has completely dropped off. The perspective of this now, it makes sense for me to now think of the next option. And from last week, we were saying that price could either drop off lower and then rally higher, or we'll see price pushing up even further higher. So one of the two, I'm not entirely sure, but I think more or less we could see price rallying a lot higher this week. So that's my kind of perspective with gold, with EU. So that's what I'm trying to look at, as a minimum from like 1.11 to 1.15. So we've got a long way to go. So with that being said, this is probably this is probably the main perspective that we've got, like the direction. But anyway, we have to wait for price to kind of turn over first. So we could expect some more downwards moves as a possibility before we get that upside rally. So I guess what we could do is, if we start to see that shift in momentum, then we can probably take on some buying opportunities. But I wouldn't be too I'm less aggressive on the sells and more leaning towards buys personally. So that's what I'm going to be looking out for EU next week. Moving on to NZDUSD. So for this, I'm actually waiting for price to potentially step lower. As we can see from our last week's analysis, we were expecting price to probably make some sort of deeper pullback before rallying higher, but nonetheless, the overall bias was still technically correct. Again, we just didn't get the the correct pullback, but that's fine. What we can go on from this is, we're still going to expect a pullback at some point. So whether it's a short-term one or a huge one, we just have to kind of wait and see where the momentum is heading towards. But yeah, I'm looking for 0.69 to be taken out. If we get price to dive straight away through the week. It's going to be more clearer for me that yes, we could probably see 0.69 being taken out if we get a deeper pullback. But yeah, that's kind of like my kind of flow of where I'm thinking right now. That's with NZDUSD. So moving on to AU. So for this, I think it's pretty much a similar situation. We were looking out for price to essentially pull back a bit more deeper. We didn't expect that huge rally in this week, so we could now expect for this week a bit more of a deeper pullback. I think this makes sense for myself. I think when we look at how price has been moving respective from last week to this week, I think it's fair to say that, you know, there is a pullback in due. So we just need to wait for price to return. And, you know, we could be looking at 0.72 or 0.73, you know, within that range. And then there's a possibility that price could, you know, again, rally higher. So again, similar situation with NZDU, so that's my thoughts on that. Looking at UJ, so UJ was in two minds, and I think I spoke about this last week. But essentially, we was looking for price to either make a complete blowout to the upside, or we would see essentially a drop off to the downside. So I pretty much had both sides covered, and again scenarios covered as well. So as you can see from the first annotation, you know, we had a blow to the upside, but it failed to kind of do so, and there was more intention on the downside. So what I didn't expect is for price to do you know, a bit more of a ripsaw kind of effect. So what I'm thinking now is that there is a possibility that sells are going to be taking place this week. So I'm looking for 114.5 to be taken out with UJ, and ultimately I'm looking for a sell-off bias mainly. So through the week, if we get a rally to the upside, you know, that could be you know, shortly lived. It really depends if if we get that clear momentum to break higher and higher and higher, then we could be looking at 116, 116.5 and seeing if we'll see those reversals. But I'm not really looking at buying too much, if that makes sense. I'm more or less situated with sell-offs for now. So yeah, we do have that 113 barrier. If we do break lower, then we will be looking to go a lot lower than that. So that's kind of the basis for now, what I'm thinking with UJ. Taking a look at CADJPY. So for this pair, this one has just been completely range bound for a very long time. Well, it feels like a very long time. January, you know, January to March, just been consolidating, very choppy. There's a lot of moves in and out around this. So, you know, what I'm seeing now is just more stepping of pressure into the downside. So I think we could possibly see a potential move lower. We kind of did cover this last week, but you know, ultimately I did say that if we did break 92 and above, we could expect more bullish momentum. We had a rejection, prices, you know, pretty much stepping lower. I think it's fair to say that, you know, we could be looking at some pullbacks on through the week, and hopefully we can get involved. We can get involved with this sell-off in price. So I will leave price, if we do break that 92 level, I'll leave that annotation there. But if I was to kind of pick, you know, like a bias for me for now, I'm liking this sell-off pressure. So we could expect a pullback at some point, and that's when I'm going to be trying to get involved and take it to the lows, maybe 88, maybe 87. That's pretty much my kind of directional bias for now for CJ. So we'll see what happens with that pair. Moving on to EJ. So for this was not expected, like I said, for this to drop off such with such power, if that makes sense, or such momentum. we basically forgot, well, we didn't really discuss if we broke 127, but at least it happened towards the end of the week. So if you did manage to get some entries in, you know, maybe if you were looking at buys, you might have got something just a little bit, but ultimately, you know, price was pretty much just a sell-off momentum all the way. So what I'm going to be looking out for EJ for this week is pretty much a similar situation with EU, and that is pretty much going to be looking for price to eventually step up to the upside now. So I'm quite happy with that annotation. Again, it just depends what we can see in the week up ahead. If we go ahead and get rid of this, so as we can see, price is already pushing lower and lower. So what I'm not going to do is just buy anywhere. I'm going to be waiting for price to, you know, really show the intention that it really does want to push up higher. So we may get a pullback, but it could lead into more further sells. So that's just something that we can keep our minds out for. And I think if we were to, you know, just keep an eye out for this, we can pretty much cover ourselves both ways. So if we were to look at some sell-offs and also some buying options, it would probably position ourselves better if we were to just only pick the one. So that's what I'm hoping to try and do for EJ for next week. So yeah, so it's moving on to AJ. So we spoke about the upside momentum breaking into 84, I believe. Yeah, so what I was personally looking for was, you know, maybe this, well, just having a bit more of a deeper pullback before looking at some more buys. But yeah, we didn't really get that. We just got that straight momentum to the upside, so that's completely fine. I think long-term thinking, you know, the bias was correct, so we just have to wait further on what the next play is. So what my thoughts are for this now is we're potentially going to be waiting for the second move that we've got drawn here, so which is that sell-off. So I'm happy to go ahead and get rid of this. Probably move this up here. But yeah, in theory, what I'm trying to look at now is to see if, you know, as we've made a new high and testing the 85, we're already seeing some rejections of it quite cleanly. My question is this going to hold? Is there going to be a more, is price going to be willing to push even higher into 86? I'm not sure, but I'm already starting to see signs of weakness, so maybe we could potentially start to look at that sell-off. And, you know, maybe long-term think we could look at price dropping all the way down into 80 flat. So we have a very long way to go if that does happen. But yeah, I'll look into this further, and obviously it won't just drop in 1 week. It'll take you know, progressive amounts of time. Maybe, you know, May we'll get there, May or April. But yeah, we'll see how far price can go with AJ. So coming to the last two pairs now is USDCHF and USDCAD. So for this pair, USDCHF, we spoke about this. So this one's actually been really choppy. It really has just been upside and downside moves. So I'm not really entirely sure what the range was for this week. Let me just quickly check for that. Okay, so it's 27. Okay, so there was a nice sell-off, 100 or so pips. But what I'm looking at more is just probably this range here. I mean, there was a 85 or so, 90 odd pips there. Personally, this has just been, you know, pretty tricky to get involved with. So I don't blame you if you know, you got stopped out on this pair in particular, or, you know, something just didn't quite work out for yourselves. So for this, I'm actually curious to see what's going to unfold with this one, because what my perspective is from last week, the analysis is that, you know, we're ultimately going to be pushing lower. So my thoughts is for now is just looking at some downside opportunities. So I've got some scenarios here. One more that I just really want to add, and I think it's this. So we're still going to have this option of, you know, potentially price, you know, willing to reverse up higher. If it really does want to, it can, and then it will give us an upside opportunity, right? But then the other option that I'm looking into as well is if we get a pullback and then a retest lower. And again, this is where you have to be kind of 50-50 on this, in the sense of looking for both buys or the sell. So I think it would make sense to probably watch for the buys first, and then if the buys don't come, then, you know, you're probably going to be waiting for that pullback and then the sell off. So that's kind of my thoughts, but I'm trying to see if this option is viable, and if so, if we can break the 90 level, this should be a key insight for me to turn over, and then the price should really just drop off from there on. I think we could be using that 0.90 barrier as a nice psych level. So psychology wise, that could be a different way to look at it, but I think that could hold a lot of sell side pressure. So we'll leave that with that. So finally we move on to USDCAD. Okay, yeah, so for this one, I was actually looking out for some momentum to the upside. We did manage to catch something in this one, but the downside move pretty much took us out, and that's where it led us to our second scenario, and that's that essential pullback. So this is what I'm trying to essentially look out for now for this week, and it's to essentially look at that for that downside move further. I think this could probably run into 124 quite easily. Again, I don't want to put that as a very clear statement, but I just want to make sure that this, you know, if we can get in some sales, it makes sense to kind of hedge ourselves and you know, not get too greedy with it. So what we could expect here is just a simple, you know, retest and push lower. You know, you could be just looking into 126 as a safe play, and then from then on, you know, just think about securing something on the table. Don't like leave this to hang over for the next week or, you know, a couple of days, etc. But I'm looking for price to potentially target into the downside of 124. So we've got a long way to go. A good 200 or 300 pips. So yeah, we've got some time. But yeah, I haven't got any other thoughts for that. I mean, it was the NFP week, so it was kind of all over the place, but we'll see what can come from this for next week. So yeah, so if you did get any value from this video, feel free to leave a like, make sure you're subscribed, and we'll see you all in the next week's video.